Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for having this hearing. If Democrats are looking to crack the code on the inflation equation, I would suggest a little self-reflection. Today's hearing title shows Democrats want to blame high prices on everything. Corporate greed, broken supply chains, even the COVID-19 virus. But here's where it gets rich. They've left out the one thing that economists of all political stripes have pointed to as a leading cause of record price increases: the massive injection of federal spending that occurred over the past year. The Biden administration's American Rescue Plan plowed nearly $2 trillion into an already strong economy. This caused consumer prices to rise more rapidly than the economy's productive capacity. This is basic economics. Widespread, out-of-control inflation is the natural consequence of dumping unnecessary cash into an economy already well into recovery from pandemic disruptions. And now my constituents and yours are paying the full price for all that free money. By the end of last year, the expenses for many working families exceeded their incomes despite any wage gains. The outlook, at least in the short run, doesn't look any better. Until we have an honest conversation about the root cause of inflation, we're not going to get anywhere. My colleagues across the aisle want to talk about so-called corporate profiteering, so let's talk about that. Profit is not synonymous with greed. You don't have to take my word for it. Former Democrat Treasury Secretary Larry Summers and Jason Furman, a top economist in the Obama administration, have been openly critical of the attempts to blame corporations for inflation. According to Summers, quote, "Business bashing is terrible economics and not very good politics." I agree. Businesses have certain fixed operational costs, just like we do at home, and things that make the cost of running a business more expensive, like taxes and regulation. Those things get included in the final prices customers have to pay. So as wages remain stagnant, American families are finding it harder and harder to keep up. You hear it around the kitchen table across the country. Housing costs, more. Food costs, more. Even baby formula, if you can find it, because we have a national crisis around the shortage of baby food, is more expensive. So that leads me to the next so-called cause of inflation my Democrat colleagues talk about, my friend just talked about: supply chain bottlenecks. Steve Ratner, who served as counselor to the Treasury Secretary in the Obama administration, noted that, quote, "Blaming inflation on supply lines is like complaining about your sweater keeping you too warm after you've already added several logs to the fireplace. The bulk of our supply problems are the product of an overstimulated economy, not the cause of it," end quote. In short, Democrats' reckless fiscal agenda fueled a spending spree right at the moment our supply logistics were under the most strain. Supply issues are a product of excessive demand that happens by default after a huge government cash dump, like the American Rescue Plan. And then there are the billions of dollars in new regulatory burdens and the ongoing impact of Democrats' mainstream shutdowns during the pandemic. The Small Business Committee, led by our friend and colleague, Congressman Lukemeyer, or the Republican leader of the committee was Congressman Lukemeyer, calculated the Biden administration has produced 283 new regulatory rules, and on the way for more, with an estimated cost to businesses of $201 billion. The private sector has been forced to jump through hoops to meet local, state, and federal regulations in their attempt to solve supply chain issues, thereby raising the cost of doing business and raising the cost of things for the consumer. Meanwhile, the previous administration's incredible efforts to cut duplicative, overburdensome regulation and support private sector endeavors have been scrapped out of political expediency or out of a political agenda. It's time to stop chasing what feels good politically and do what's right economically. We must restore fiscal discipline and promote policies that support energy independence and long-term economic prosperity. Until we do that, Democrats will keep throwing flimsy excuses at the wall to see what sticks politically. And Americans are, quite frankly, tired of cleaning up the mess. With that, thank you, Madam Chair, for holding this hearing. Thank you for allowing us to discuss this important subject matter. I yield back.